Well, hello again, everybody. Welcome to the open mic. This is Rich Eisen. And as you know, if you're a regular viewer here, this is where I get together and spend a half an hour talking about writing and publishing with somebody from the writing and publishing world. And today I'm thrilled to be joined by Marie Whittaker, who has got her finger in a lot of different things going on with some YA and children's stuff and writers' conferences and short stories and different kinds of novels. So this is exciting for me to get to talk to a writer that I'm just discovering here. So Marie, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you. It's my pleasure to be here.
Oh, pleasure's all mine, believe me. Um, I want to start out with the series that you write under a pen name, Amity Green.
Mhm.
For those who may not know, tell me a bit about the books, which I believe is the Fate and Fire series, correct?
Yes, correct.
Yeah,
Uh-huh.
and those are a YA dark fantasy, correct?
Correct. Book one is YA. I wouldn't say that the rest of them are too YA just because the character is growing up and some other things, get involved. It doesn't get too sexy or anything, but the violence deepens and just stuff like that. So I'm a mom and I would say that book two and book three are not are not YA, but book one is okay for YA.
Sure. And what's the basic premise there? I mean, and I want to ask you some more questions about not just YA, but that slightly beyond YA world too.
Mhm.
But first of all, tell folks a little bit about the series. What's your basic premise with the series?
Okay, I got the idea of writing the first book, Scales, while I was studying abroad over in London. I was studying British literature, and we did a lot of tours. And we went to museums, and then we toured all of the playhouses because British literature really got its start with a lot of poetry. So we did all of the tours and everything, and on my last day there, I had like half an hour maybe to myself after I got off the tube, and I went to Cecil Court and I got the idea for the character Tessa. And I also love gargoyles. So while I was over there, I was taking all the pictures I could of gargoyles. And I thought, it would just be fun to write a shapeshifter series where a girl was changed into a gargoyle, like a living, breathing gargoyle. I didn't think anybody had done anything like that yet. So that's how I got the concept for Scales. And then so book one, Scales, that's all about her like coming of age and learning to live with the changes, the transformation and everything. She does get stuck over in the UK. She can't go back to the US anymore. She's originally a student from Austin. And then book two is like her learning to kind of master it and use it to do things that are good when she meets other, people who have been changed, like some ancient people who have been changed into gargoyles, and they're just pure evil and they're ticked off all the time and doing all the wrong things all the time. And that helps her decide what kind of a gargoyle she wants to be.
Yeah, it's fascinating to me because, as you noted in your second book, it's not necessarily just aimed at the YA audience. And I find that more and more with quote unquote YA books. And we see more and more authors who are known more for their very mainstream adult fiction, whether it's Jonathan Mayberry, who we both know, of course,
Mhm.
but even so many more. Peter Abrahams is one that comes to mind, who writes a lot of YA and younger audience stuff. And it just seems more and more these books are not aimed just at the 13 to 17, I guess, year old crowd, but really are
Mhm.
digestible by pretty much anybody.
Mhm.
What are your thoughts on that? Is that how you planned to evolve the series all along?
Yeah, that's how I planned to evolve it. I didn't Well, okay, I didn't set out to write YA stuff. I knew it was going to be pretty violent, and I knew like the transformation scenes were going to be, fairly graphic and things like that. And also, we're talking about a college student, so that actually puts it up into like new adult rather than YA as far as like the age groups go. It somebody a friend of mine read it and recommended it as YA stuff, and that's how it got recommended to be recommended reading for young adults. But I know so many adults that read young adult fiction and love it. So I really didn't mind too much. Um, but they, it's a long YA book is the thing. If a kid were to read it, they would probably find it a little bit long, because typical YA stuff is, probably a good 30,000 words shorter than Scales.
Well, that's interesting too, because you mentioned new adult, which is, it's funny, as long as I've been around this stuff, I still am learning about all the various lines between genres. And how do you differentiate YA from young adult from new adult? Is there an age breakdown the way we do with every other demographic part of the world?
The lines are so blurry with those two. Basically, these days, so much more goes for YA stuff. Harsh language really isn't a barrier anymore. I would say, like, every other word being an F-bomb is probably a bad idea. But a lot of YA stuff has language in it, has a little bit of sexual content, and also has a good deal of violence. Like, there's no ceiling on the violence in YA these days. So I would say new adult stuff, it would be more for me about the content, like college age, more of a coming into an adulthood type of theme for new adult books.
Well, the YA genre and probably new adult too, they have really exploded in popularity. As we're talking about, they're popular with adults too. Why do you think that is? Because I think for a long time, most adults would not think about reading something aimed at a younger audience once they get out of that age, right? But now it seems to be something they're very comfortable with, and the genre is really popular. Why do you think that is? Is it the subject matter evolving a little bit, or is there something else maybe you think that draws people to reading these books?
I think there's two things. I think it's the subject matter has evolved, and they tend to stay, pretty current with what's going on. And then the second thing is, I think adults like them because they're quick reads. Many adults can sit down and digest a 60 or 70,000 word novel like in a couple days or something like that. Whereas if they're reading something from like one of the Game of Thrones books or something like that, we're talking about like a doorstop of a book that might take a little bit longer.
It is true. We're living in short attention span theater era right now. We don't.
Oh, yeah.
It is challenging to pick up 150,000 word book. Which, though, the interesting thing is, if anyone who's ever read a Harry Potter knows those are not short books. So maybe there's still those outliers as well.
Yeah, I think so. I did a lot of reading those to my kids. And so that might have something to do with it, is the strong read out loud potential, that those books have for families. Because not only did we read them, we went and saw all the movies together. So yeah, I think that might have a lot to do with it.
What about the horror theme? Because I know for a long time, young books aimed at a younger audience were, there was coming of age, but it was it didn't revolve around the more traditional Gothic horror themes that we see now regularly, like the ones you write and others. How did that evolution come about? Is that how new is that? Did I miss when that started, or is that still actually a relatively new thing?
I don't think it's really a new thing. I don't know exactly when it started, but I personally got my start as a horror writer. So it's just like everything that I write tends to have a little bit of a dark theme to it. I just like writing books that keep you on your edge, like thrillers. I love writing psychological thrillers and supernatural thrillers too. So for me, I guess it's just something that's ingrained as me as a writer. And so I kind of put it in there.
Sure. Now, you also have a children's book series, The Adventures of Lola Hopscotch. Tell me a little bit about that. And did you also always want to write an actual children's book, or is this something that came about later and you said, hey, I want to try that?
It is something that came about later. I've spent probably the last 7 years of my life learning about the publishing industry and how to do that well. And I got to a certain point in my writing career that I knew I wanted to use everything that I'd learned to do some good. And, you know, anti-bullying is a cause that's really close to my heart. So the Adventures of Lola Hopscotch, all the books are themed towards anti-bullying, helping others, and kindness, spreading a lot of kindness, especially, you know, especially to kids who are young and coming up and maybe move to a different school or something like that. Just those books also have strong read out loud potential, because I wanted them to foster communication between little kids and their adults, so that if something happens to the kids at school, they'll feel comfortable coming home and talking to their adults about the fact that they were bullied or something made them horribly uncomfortable or something, and they won't feel ashamed or something like that.
You know, that's
So
great. I'm sorry to interrupt. I mean, that's great because, you know, I'm a political reporter by trade, and this is a theme that we've seen across the states.
yeah.
In the last decade or so, there's been a lot of emphasis on anti-bullying and trying to find ways to eradicate bullying where they can, or at least, as you know, to make kids more comfortable in speaking up about it. So I think that's great. What was the reaction to that when you you know, was that always going to be the theme, or you know, did you you know, was that something that also has an evolution to it?
It definitely has an evolution. I was only going to write one book originally, and I started it off as a Kickstarter. It was a successful Kickstarter. We got like a lot of early traction that way, and I figured just one anti-bullying book would be great, and I would put everything that I had behind that and make sure, you know, to try to put it in front of little kids everywhere. So when I started thinking about writing a children's book, I knew I wanted it to be an anti-bullying children's book, and I knew I wanted it to have a Colorado influence. So lots of wildflowers in there and animals. Book 2 is where all that started to kind of conflict with my start as a horror writer. I wrote a kids' Halloween book called Lola Hopscotch and the Spookaroo. And it also has like a lot of Colorado themes with pine trees and animals and things like that. Same protagonist, Lola Hopscotch. And then book 3, there's a new kid, Lola Hopscotch. That one's all about helping the new kid and body image differences and what to do if, you know, other kids are bullying another kid because of the way they look or something like that. So I don't think we're done making those little books. There are so many themes that kids in elementary school struggle with that I really kind of think I want to keep doing them. The Pacer Center picked them up for their book club. The Pacer Center is a great big organization that helps with bullying, big anti-bullying movements there. And then standforthesilent.org is also another anti-bullying organization that endorses Lola Hopscotch as well. So they've got them up on their websites, and the books are available pretty much everywhere. You can get them at Walmart, Target, Amazon, of course, and Barnes and Noble and stuff like that all over online.
That's great. And you know, since you like to write horror and thrillers in your adult writing, do you, and you, so you already used the one pen name, Amity Green.
Mm-hmm.
You talked about the things you've learned in the industry. So this is really where I'm going with this, because I think anyone who's involved in this for any length of time will quickly learn that there is writing and then there is publishing. And the two can be very different, and where one can be very pleasurable and very, you know, a lot of fun, the other one can really be not fun at all, and eye-opening and discouraging and all those things, along with the good stuff too.
Yeah.
When you do something that's as widely disparate as kids' books and adult horror, did you ever feel like maybe you needed to write them under different names, or you know, what was the response to that? Did you were you encouraged to separate them greatly so that they could be more distinct to audiences? I mean, how did the business part of that go when you started working on these books?
So originally I was going to write the kids book under a different name because I am rebranding the Amity Green pen name to just be Marie Whittaker. So we're redesigning all the covers, and different publishers, actually another publisher just picked up the Fate and Fire series. And so they're going to be reworking that and republishing that in my name, Marie Whittaker. So there's only going to be like extreme horror, one extreme horror book out there, The Witcher Chime, that's published in Amity Green. But what changed my mind about not publishing the kids' books under Marie Whittaker is I have been working forever to establish a network and readers group. And I wanted to really pull on all of the networking and all of, everybody that I already had who might be interested in that cause, in something that I felt that strongly about. So I wrote them under my name, and it's worked out. There's an obvious difference in book covers and things like that. We did set up a separate website for the Adventures of Lola Hopscotch, though, and it's very family oriented. A lot of images from the books and stuff like that. There's no horror over there at all. But my other website, that's where you'll find all the horror stuff and the thrillers and urban fantasy and stuff like that. And then there's another page that's dedicated to Lola Hopscotch over there.
Well, I mean, that's great. And I certainly understand once you've established a name, a presence, a brand in this industry, it is really hard to step away from that, because the one thing that I think every writer will tell you, and with a few exceptions, if you're in that very top 1 percentile of best-selling authors, not much has changed over the last 20 years. But if you're not, marketing budgets, even through a legacy Big Five publisher, are shrinking exponentially. It's very challenging. So I imagine it was really hard to even think about. But you really do want to pull every resource you can to make sure that your work gets out there and is recognized.
Absolutely.
Now I understand too, you write short stories, and I'm a huge reader of short stories. I love anthologies of all kinds, horror and noir and dark fantasy and crime. And there's something about a really good short story that's very compelling to me as a reader. How about for you as a writer? What is your favorite kind of short story to write? And what is the most compelling thing to you about short stories in general?
Short stories are a challenge to write because every word has to pack a punch. Like when you write a novel, it can be a little bit wordier. But whenever you write a short story, every word really has to count because you keep it tight. I mean, there's no extra, flourishes or anything like that. You tell the story with not as many words, I guess is what I'm trying to say. So I like that challenge. I like writing horror stories best out of all the stories that I've ever written. Since we're talking about short stories, I just had an anthology come out today. It's called Particular Passages. And my story in that is called Folly. It's published with a bunch of my best friends, my best writer friends around. So that's, something that's really special to me. But my short story in that one, Folly, it's creative nonfiction, and it's told kind of stream of consciousness from when I was a kid. And my dad was building our house here in Colorado. And it has a lot of sentimental value because a few months ago, my dad got COVID and he came out of it okay. But I was pretty scared for him for a while. He has some asthma issues and things like that. So it was amazing to be brought into that anthology and be able to publish that short story at a time like this.
Oh,
so
I
that was out
imagine.
there. Yeah.
It must have been therapeutic.
Yeah, it was definitely.
Well, I'm glad he's okay.
Thanks.
Yeah, I mean that whole subject is tough. I've known several folks who've lost their parents. Two people who've lost parents and several more who got it themselves. All have come through, some better than others. It's really been a very challenging last year and a half for everybody, I think.
It has.
Now, I understand you're working on an alternative history novel. Are you still?
Oh yeah.
Tell me about that. Because that's another subject I find interesting. Tell me about your alternative history novel. Are we seeing an Inglorious Bastards or a Once Upon a Time in Hollywood kind of thing?
No, this one is kind of like maybe a little bit like the Hunger Games or something. It involves kids that are 10 to 15 years old. It takes place during the Cromwellian era, and it talks a lot about indentured servitude and the Irish and what happened to them back in that day. And, it goes through the story of a young girl who was basically kidnapped and sold over into the States, Jamestown, as an indentured servant. And that side of history has always, been fascinating to me just because of my own family lineage. And so it's easy for me to do a lot of research. When I got the idea to write that book, it's called Slain, and I'm not done with it yet, but it's one of my favorite projects that I've ever started. It's taken a little while longer just because at first I kind of had the idea that it would be okay for younger audiences, but then I wanted it to contain true subject matter about what the people actually went through. And so it is not for kids. There's violence.
That would have been my next question. When
It is not.
you do research for a book like this, and you say it's alternative history, so you're doing the research into what actually happened and to the best that we know of these things. Are you then taking a situation and changing how the history actually happened to create a story? Is that how we're defining alternative history here?
Yeah, that's how I'm defining it for the purpose of this book, because I wanted my protagonist to find a way back to Ireland or to Great Britain to take down Cromwell.
Oh,
So that was like that was my idea for the book. So alternative, that's the alternative part.
Yeah.
If I wasn't going to have her do that, it would be historical fiction.
Right, exactly. So
Yeah.
like I say, that's why my point of reference these days with alternative history, I guess, is probably Tarantino. Like, hey, so that's why I'm asking you about these things like Inglourious Basterds. So, tell me about Wordfire Press.
Okay. Wordfire Press was founded by Kevin J. Anderson and Rebecca Mesta. They're my bosses, and they are the publishers there. And they're also two of my very good friends. I love working for them. And so the press is a medium-sized new model publishing company. And we publish a lot of science fiction and fantasy, some horror, a few thrillers, some writing aids, and just over the last couple years, we've developed a really nice line of classics, like reprints where we come up with gorgeous covers and do them in hardcover and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
My boss Kevin, he teaches at Western Colorado University, and he teaches a publishing program up there. And so we work with the students to publish one book. Each of them will publish one reprint out of public domain within the semester. And that's how we're, coming up with all these concepts for these gorgeous books. And it's really cool for the students to be able to publish through a publishing house that way. So I work like really closely with the students to get their, books published. And let's see, at Wordfire, I also head up the audiobooks division. I'm an associate publisher at Wordfire. I'm not one of the publishers, but I'm an associate. And I also help out with project management for the press, some marketing stuff for the press, doing, some Amazon ads, things like that. And I also liaison between the authors. I liaise between the authors a lot too, to help Kevin, because he has so much coming up with Dune, the movie, and his teaching up at Western and stuff like that. So it's morphed a lot. When I first started working working for Kevin, I was 10 hours a week as his assistant. And now I work full time for him, helping him, to run the press and stuff so that he has more time to work on his projects.
So what kind of authors, now you told me a little bit about this subject matter you carry. Do you have to, does the press deal with agents, or are your authors unagented? Because I'm anticipating someone who's watching this, as most people who are, hopefully going to get themselves published someday, might go, oh, what do I need to know about this press? Would I approach this press? So, how does that process normally work if a writer said, oh, hey, Wordfire Press, I should check into them. I write horror, or I write this, how would that work for them?
Well, we're kind of closed for new books right now, but that doesn't mean, I don't mean to discourage people.
That's part of this industry.
Yeah, we are like, I'm booking into July of 2022 right now. So, and that's with new releases, never before published books. So I don't know, the way it works with Wordfire is we publish a 50-50 split. Some of our authors are agented and others are not. And that, that's something that we don't really, it's okay if an author doesn't have an agent. I know this industry really, really well, and it's okay. So we work with agents, or we work with authors that don't have them. As far as like genre and stuff like that, one thing that we have coming up is a horror collection from Jonathan Mayberry. It's every one of his short zombie stories from the beginning of his career. So these stories like span his career, and this, I am just so excited to be able to help, because like you said, he's like a really good friend of mine. And so we have that coming up, in September 1st is the release day, just in time for the season. So mainly science fiction and fantasy, probably what we publish most.
Well, I wanted to ask you too about the Superstars Conference, because I know you said you're the co-director. That's another area where a lot of writers, they want to go. I think every writer knows that conferences are a good thing, especially early maybe in your career when you're really trying to meet people and learn things. But conferences all are a little different. They offer different things, and they're aimed at different groups. Some are more aimed at really aspiring, getting into the business writers. Others are, the big international thriller writers conference that's aimed at every major, published author in the world. Tell me a little bit about the Superstars Conference and what somebody who might come across that would expect if they attended.
Okay, so Superstars runs for 4 days. It happens in February each year, except for, well, we had to postpone because of COVID, but it takes place February 9th through 12th of 2022. The first day, February 9th, is something new that we added just a couple years ago, and that is the only day of the conference that is devoted to writing craft and actually working on the craft of writing. The other 3 days are all for the business of writing. And that ranges from marketing, publishing, dealing with agents, dealing with publishers, pitching your work, cover art, ads and sales copy, just everything, all of that stuff that you should know as a writer. And those are the 3 days after craft day. And so some of the things that go on, like Friday, we always have our exclusive VIP dinner, and that's where all of our instructors go to a fancy dinner. It's a banquet, like a big banquet hall, and then whoever wants to go to the dinner, they get to sit with one of our instructors. That's always really exciting. Like coming up in February, we have Hugh Howey, Jody Lynn Nye, Jonathan Mayberry, Jim Butcher, Kevin J. Anderson, David Farland, Eric Flint, Mallory Cooper. We have such a great lineup this year, and it's just, I'm really excited about it.
Yeah, that's a great lineup. I won't do it now. Another time I will tell you the story of how I first met Jonathan Mayberry at a conference, and I have a story that will show you how incredibly graceful he is for in dealing with morons who. I'll just tell you the story another time. Sorry, folks.
Okay.
Two quick things. So publishing has changed a lot over the last 20 years. There didn't used to be a lot of presses like WordFire. But of course, we've seen a million changes. The winnowing down of all the publishing houses down to what is now a big five, maybe a big four, as some people would probably say.
Four of them.
But at the same time, there's been some more positive evolution for self-publishing or smaller presses, even university presses that didn't used to maybe have much cachet. That's changed a lot. How would you define the industry right now for writers? Are things better for writers? Are they maybe tougher? I mean, how would you, somebody who was a total newbie and they said, Marie, I think I want to do this, but I don't know. What do you think about the industry? Is it, what would you tell them?
I think writers, as artists, are probably the most welcoming type of artist there is. The majority of writers and the ones that I know and consider friends are always the ones that are willing to give somebody a hand when you're coming up as a writer. And that's another thing that I love about Superstars. Our tribe there, we're always, helping one another. It's not competition at all. That being said, there's a lot more out there than there was before, just like you said. But those are learning opportunities, really. So I think it's better. I think because of conferences and the ability to get together, and network and things, and you can network online and stuff. I think it's better these days. Self-publishing, I'm a hybrid author. I'm published through traditional publishers, and I'm also, I published Little Hopscotch myself. So it opens up even more opportunities to learn. And when you there are pros and cons to self-publishing. When you self-publish a book, it's in your hands. You control your own ads. You control how much you can spend on one thing or another. You control your own release date, your own cover art. You just get to, be in complete control of the publishing of one of your types of IP. But when you work with a publisher, you don't have to worry about any of that.
Right.
You still have to market yourself. That's one thing that's changed. The days when, I call them the unicorn days, whenever, you're like, you have your first book and you're getting ready to go publish it, and you pitch it to an agent and they pick it up and you make $1 million off of the first run and all of this. Those are definitely the unicorn days. That doesn't happen, these days anymore. You can still have like great stories with trad publishing, but it's not the way it used to be, for sure.
Yeah, I've often described it to people who ask me, it's like you're trying to hit a moving target from 500 yards with a blow dart. I mean, somebody can do it, but I'm really glad to hear that, though. I mean, I think, I was joking earlier about how discouraging the business side of it can be. And I think that's true. But I tend to agree with you. If you have a plan and you're realistic about what your book's reach could be, for me, and talking to writers at all levels from around the country, I think the thing that stands out to me, two things that stand out to me, and I'd be interested to know what you think. One is successful writers write all the time. Writers write, as Stephen King said. Yep. They have, maybe not every single day, but they have a very unique, or not unique, a very consistent writing schedule. They make it as much a job as their real job, if they still have one or what have you, but they write. They don't talk about writing, they write.
Yes.
Number one. And then the other one is that they're very realistic about what their project is. Is it something that has blockbuster potential, with a Dan Brown kind of story? Or is it more something that's going to have a limited audience to a particular, theme or something along those lines? Because if you're trying to sell a small theme book to big theme publishers, you're going to be nothing but disappointed. So
Yeah.
that's the thing I see delineating, the success more for new writers than anything else. Do you see something different from those that's also a common thread with successful writers that I didn't mention?
Not really. I mean, the way they, I don't know. I got to figure out how to word this correctly. Maybe,
I made it hard because I asked that in a very convoluted way.
yeah. So let's have just like the question part again.
So the question, what is there a consistent thing you see among successful folks who are coming in and getting started and are successful?
Yes, there are quite a few consistencies I have seen. One is they do treat their writing career as their job. They act professionally and they take it seriously as their job. The second thing is they love to teach. They'll do what they can to teach others. And the third thing is they do work at it every day in one way or another, whether it's like promoting their work, getting in their word count. Like there are times of the year when I try for 3,000 words a day. And then there are other times, parts of the year where I'm just chugging along at 500 words a day. So everybody has these different, preferences. They set goals. They set goals and they hold themselves accountable for their goals. So those are things that I see with the ones who are, doing it right and their careers are on the rise and stuff, or they have risen, they're already up there. They work at it all the time because whether they're self-published, hybrid, or traditionally published, you still have to market your work. The days when a publisher is going to do all the marketing for you have long passed. They expect, just because you get published with like HarperCollins or something like that, they still expect you to be a strong promoter of your work. So there's always something to do.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I only have one final question, and I always intend it to be a fun question. I hope it's a fun question. A little challenging, but meant to be a fun kind of challenging. Let us say that I had the ability to put you together for a good long conversation with just one of the following three people. Which one would you choose and why? And the options that I will give you today are the great children's author Beatrix Potter, Anne Rice, she of the great Vampire Diaries fame, among many others, and the historic Chuck Yeager. There's probably a better word than historic, but Beatrix Potter, Anne Rice, or Chuck Yeager. I can put you together with just one of those three people to hang out with and pick their brain and chat. Who would you choose and why?
Anne Rice, easily. I used to read all of her stuff, coming up as a horror writer. I was also a horror reader. So I've been a longtime fan. And that's like, I would love to run into her at a convention or a conference or something like that. So yeah,
that would be fun.
Easy answer.
And I think I said something stupid. I think I said Vampire Diaries. I meant Interview with a Vampire. If I said that,
I was tracking. It's okay.
It's been that kind of a day. For those who might wonder, we're doing this on a Friday afternoon. It's been a long week. Anyway,
it's been a week.
Marie, thank you for your patience in that regard too. It's appreciated greatly. Thank you very much. I appreciate you sharing your time and your insights here. This is always helpful. And I wish you all the best of success. I think it sounds like you have many excellent irons in the fire, and that's always a good thing. So
yeah.
I would love to read the short story anthology. That sounds great. Like I say, I love those. So I'll be looking for that myself here shortly. And for those of you who might be watching this right now, I would suggest the same. If you haven't hit the subscribe button, please do so now. Because I do this a couple times a week, and this is your own masterclass in writing and publishing from a lot of really smart people like Marie Whittaker. So thank you again, Marie.
Thanks.
Talk to you again soon. Let me know when one of those novels hits the big time. We'll do this again.
I sure will. Thanks so much for having me. It's been
Okay,
fun.
fantastic. Take